In the first 10 seconds of this story, remember this detail. A woman vanished without a scream, without a struggle, without a single confirmed crime scene, and when her family asked the police where she was, they were told to stop asking questions. Because this was a disappearance the authorities never wanted the public to truly know about. A case quietly buried under paperwork, excuses, and silence, and yet the clues left behind whisper something far darker than an accident or a voluntary escape. This true crime story begins in the late summer of 2006. In a mid-sized industrial city that prided itself on order, routine, and quiet streets. A place where most people believed nothing truly evil could survive unnoticed. And where police badges carried unchallenged authority. And at the center of it all was 32-year-old Evelyn Carter, a municipal records clerk who lived alone in a narrow brick apartment building near the river, a woman known by coworkers as punctual, almost painfully ordinary, someone who kept handwritten lists, arrived early, left late, and never missed a call from her mother. Never skipped a Sunday dinner, never broke routine, which is why the morning she didn't show up for work felt immediately wrong. Evelyn had no criminal history, no known enemies, no romantic drama that spilled into public view, and yet she carried a quiet tension in her personal life, a tension rooted in her job. Because working municipal records meant knowing things you were never meant to know. Sealed files, restricted archives, case numbers that led nowhere, internal police memos that quietly contradicted public press releases. And over the years, Evelyn had confided to a close friend that sometimes she wished she had chosen a less complicated career. Because some documents stayed with you long after you locked them back into a drawer. On August 14th, Evelyn left her apartment at 7:10 a.m., captured briefly by a grainy hallway camera that showed her adjusting her jacket, holding a folder under her arm that did not match her usual work bag. And then she stepped outside and disappeared into a city that would later pretend it never swallowed her. When she failed to arrive at her office by 8:30, her supervisor assumed illness, but by noon, concern spread, and by evening her mother filed a missing person report, expecting urgency sirens, a full-scale response. Yet instead she encountered something cold and procedural officers who took notes without eye contact, who asked oddly specific questions, who seemed less interested in finding Evelyn than in categorizing her disappearance in the least alarming way possible. From the beginning, police framed the case as voluntary absence, suggesting stress, burnout, or a desire to start fresh somewhere else. Even though Evelyn's bank accounts remained untouched, her passport was still in her apartment, her phone last pinged within 3 blocks of her home, and her cat had been left unfed. Details that in countless other true crime cases would immediately trigger alarm bells. The environment around Evelyn's last known movements was dense with cameras, and witnesses, a busy transit corridor lined with shops and offices, yet investigators later admitted they never formally requested most of the surveillance footage until weeks had passed, by which time much of it had been overwritten, an omission that would haunt the case forever. Friends described Evelyn as nervous in the days before she vanished, distracted, checking over her shoulder, and one coworker recalled seeing her argue in hushed tones with a man in a dark suit near the records office, someone who flashed a badge but did not identify himself, an encounter the police would later dismiss as mistaken memory. As days turned into weeks, the official investigation stalled. Press releases grew shorter and vaguer, and the narrative of Evelyn choosing to leave was pushed harder, despite mounting contradictions. And then came the first truly disturbing discovery inside her apartment, hidden behind a loose baseboard. Her mother found a small notebook that police had somehow failed to notice, a notebook filled with dates, file numbers, and a single repeated phrase written in uneven handwriting. "Do not trust internal closure." Words that meant nothing to the family, but everything to journalists, who later learned it was slang among record clerks for cases that were officially closed without satisfactory resolution. When the notebook was handed to detectives, it vanished from evidence, never logged, never referenced again. And when the family asked about it, they were told no such notebook existed. The crime itself, if it can be called that, unfolded in fragments like scenes missing from a damaged film reel. A witness who reported seeing a woman matching Evelyn's description speaking urgently to 2 uniformed officers near a service entrance by the river that morning. A transit card swipe recorded at a station she had no reason to use. A blurry traffic camera image showing a city-owned vehicle pulling over briefly, its plates unreadable, its occupants unknown, each fragment raising questions but never officially connected. As the investigation dragged on, independent journalists began to notice something else. A pattern of disappearances over a span of 15 years, all involving low-level municipal employees, all officially labeled as voluntary departures, all quietly closed within months, all sharing the same supervising police unit, a unit tasked with internal affairs, a cruel irony that fed public distrust once the pattern emerged. The police response to these revelations was defensive, dismissive, and at times openly hostile, warning reporters against defamation, refusing interviews and citing privacy laws to block access to records. Tactics that only fueled suspicion and turned Evelyn Carter's disappearance into a symbol of something much larger, a potential institutional cover-up. The most shocking turning point came when a retired detective, terminally ill and no longer bound by ambition, contacted a podcast host and claimed on record that Evelyn had discovered inconsistencies in a high-profile case involving an in-custody death ruled accidental, inconsistencies that suggested evidence tampering by officers, and that she had requested a formal review shortly before she vanished, a request that would have passed through multiple layers of command. According to the detective, the internal response was panic, not because the evidence was weak, but because it was too strong, and because admitting fault would unravel dozens of cases built on the same foundation. So the simplest solution was to erase the problem quietly, without a body, without charges, without a clear crime scene. Police denied these claims, yet refused to allow independent review, and crucially, they never sued the detective for defamation, an omission that spoke louder than any statement. Years passed. Court cases failed to move forward due to lack of physical evidence. The family exhausted savings on private investigators who hit the same walls of red tape, missing files, unreturned calls, sealed documents. And Evelyn's case became one of those dark case files spoken about in online forums and late-night documentaries. A cautionary tale about power, silence, and the fragile line between protector and predator. To this day, no remains have been found, no credible sightings confirmed, no official acknowledgement of wrongdoing issued. Only a closed file stamped with administrative language that avoids the word crime entirely. The impact of the disappearance rippled outward, eroding trust in local law, enforcement inspiring whistleblower protections at a state level years later, and haunting a city that learned too late that some secrets are not meant to be kept behind badges and locked cabinets. So we are left with unanswered questions that define this true crime story did. Evelyn Carter uncovered something so dangerous it demanded permanent silence. Did a system designed to enforce law choose instead to protect itself? And how many other names lie buried in similar files labeled resolved when they are anything but? This is Dark Case Files, where forgotten stories are dragged back into the light, and it reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying disappearances are not mysteries of the unknown, but of the unseen decisions made behind closed doors. And before you leave this story, ask yourself this: if the police never wanted you to know about this disappearance, what else have they convinced you never to question? If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe to Dark Case Files, because the darkest cases are the ones that were never meant to be found.